Tutorial Podcast, a podcast offering discussions and tutorials on nerdy subjects for people who aren't necessarily nerdy themselves. With you today, myself, is your nerdy tutor Georgia. With me here today, Princess Peach, my mom.
Hey.
So, we had people, we had my mom play some games over the weekend.
Yes.
And some homework. And the games in which we played were any Mario Kart that you had available. It didn't really matter which version. Mario Party, which we didn't get a chance to play necessarily, but I have put a video up for all three of the games that we're talking about here on our website with people playing them. And these are people who do have some experience playing them, and they're not professional players of these games by any means, but they're all having fun.
It's not like Switch.
No. So, but they're all having fun. And we just finished playing a little bit of Super Mario Brothers 1.
Yes.
And so what did you think of that?
Okay, well, first of all, let me just say, my 8-year-old granddaughter could beat me at Mario Kart.
It's okay.
It's really pretty debilitating. But watching your brothers getting into Mario Kart's a hoot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They're pretty competitive. Jeez.
We don't like to lose.
Don't like to lose. But no, that's a lot of fun because you get to go through sort of the universe's change as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we just got done playing the original Mario.
The original Super Mario Brothers.
Super Mario Brothers on a Switch, and I could totally see getting into that.
Oh, yeah.
Because I got smaller and bigger. That was eating mushrooms. And much like Alice in Wonderland with the mushroom thing, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. And I finally figured out how to double stomp. What are those things?
Those are known as Koopas.
Koopas. Oh, that's what a Koopa is. Because Koopa looks really different in Super Mario Kart.
So the turtles are known as Koopas. The mushroom guys, I always forget what their names are. They're like the bad version of Toad.
Okay.
I know in Japan they're known as Karibos, but I know that's not what they're typically known as here in America.
They're just the little dudes.
They're little dudes that got like angry little eyes and everything.
Yeah.
It was very intentional.
Okay, so trying to figure out. So I'm a neophyte, which is why I absolutely suck at Mario Kart. I'm a neophyte at using the joysticks, so that's takes some getting used to. Mm-hmm. And I'm just dealing with A and B and forwards. One of the things that surprised me is you can't go backwards; you only go forwards.
So in this
only go to your right.
So in this one, yeah, for the hardware limitation at the time from when the Super Mario first came out, they only let you move in one direction because really only what they could program at the time. They would get much better at coding and programming these games much later on to do quite a bit of cool stuff at it. But for the time being, they were very limited in what they could do with the hardware. So
you can go backwards a couple steps, but you can't go backwards off the screen.
No, once the screen progresses forward at a certain point, you can't go backwards.
Okay, and slowly figured out how to jump. It got more natural. I think there's sort of a inherent thing like patting your head and rubbing your stomach, right? Mm-hmm. There's sort of an inherent thing about pressing a button while pushing a knob.
Yeah.
That takes some getting used to.
Mm-hmm.
So with my left hand, I'm pushing a knob, and with my right hand, I'm punching two buttons. I'm going to assume that this gets a whole lot more complex because there are two knobs, one for left and right, and there are 4 buttons.
So
I'm on a Switch.
So what I'll say here is that on the Switch, has all these extra buttons for a lot of other games that utilize all these functions. Thankfully, for the most part, a lot of Mario games don't actually use a lot of those buttons. I think Odyssey was probably the one that's on the Switch right now is probably the most to use a collection of to use more of those buttons. But a lot of the ways they use the buttons is also to kind of manipulate with the camera. But it primarily uses just only a few buttons realistically for most Mario games.
Okay.
And we should say that we're using the Switch because that's the most current version of Nintendo architecture and hardware that's available right now. It's also very portable at the same time, which makes it very easy to take it with you to different places. It literally has a kickstand on the back, so you could prop it up so you could prop it up on a table or something to.
And the joysticks on either side actually detach.
So what's unique about the Switch is that on the side of it they have what they call the Joy-Cons. There's a right one and a left one. And what you could do is you could pop off both of them and continue to play the game as though you needed both of them to play. So in some cases you might need both of the controllers to play. Some games you would use both of them at the same time. They have also got accelerometers and rumble elements in them. So as an example, for Mario Odyssey, in which you have to flick Cappy all the time, which is a little hat element to flick it towards stuff. If you had the actual controllers out, you would flick it with your wrist and it would flick the hat forward for you.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So, mind you, for the number of times you do it, it gets really repetitive. So that's why I don't usually do it. But what's nice about it as well is that if you hold it sideways, there's little buttons at the top here as well. So it mimics a standard, what I would say is a standard Super Nintendo controller.
Oh.
So you or even just a regular standard Game Boy SP or Advanced controller as well. So you have the ability to kind of push both buttons at the top. You have the diagonal stick, which is not exactly centered in the middle, but it's enough there that if you had a party game, you could use it with this. I mean, you can play Mario Kart with this, and I've played Mario Kart on these little controllers before pretty easily. And so
it's a pretty neat concept because really, when you look at the size of it, it's thick. It's certainly thicker, but it's about the size of a large format cell phone.
Yeah,
with joysticks on either end.
Yeah, like if you took the joysticks off, it'd probably be as big as like an Apple, like the Apple 10 or the Apple 11 sort of cell phone, thicker. But then you had like the Joy-Con elements or controllers on the other side, and so they obviously make it a lot wider. But you can take those off.
I really like the idea. I mean, like you could take that on a plane.
Oh, I have taken this on plane multiple times. This is my favorite console to travel with if I have to.
Yeah.
I've admittedly taken this with when I've done DoorDashes when I'm waiting for orders, and I'll just hang out with it in the car and play a game. And I got an order. Great, I'll put it down. I can put it on sleep mode and go do my order and then come back. What's nice about it as well is it has the universal C-type connector at the very bottom, so you can plug in a charging cable to this, like you would for most Android phones now that are using the C-type USB, and you can start charging it right away.
I'm actually pretty impressed with that. But how much should I expect to pay for that?
They're retailing anywhere from about $249 to $299, depending on the type of model that you get. And they have deals all the time that come out with this. In a lot of cases, they'll come out with games and stuff like that. If you have the ability to, I always recommend getting a refurbished model in some cases because they'll generally cost a bit less over time. They'll cost less to get it. And you can kind of ensure that a refurbished means that it has all the working parts in it still, and it's been checked to make sure it's still in good working order. Yeah,
I've bought cameras that way, where it was camera equipment that I really wanted that was going to be much more expensive new.
Yeah, and it's a big investment to get. Don't get me wrong, because all the games are about $60 each in a lot of cases, and there's a lot of games that you can actually get. You can download directly onto the system. So while they have little cartridges you can get for it, you can also just download them directly. Thankfully, they have this nice little Super Nintendo and Nintendo element that we were using that just has a whole bunch of their old catalog on there, free to play.
Okay.
And they have they have some other free games you can get online. But if you want to play like the Mario Kart, the Mario Odyssey, or
Animal Crossing,
which I am just getting into right now, Life Simulator.
Yeah.
It really is. You have debt and everything. It's hilarious.
That's kind of fun. I actually, and this is not to do with Mario, but to do with Animal Crossing and SimCity and some of those others. And your nieces play Minecraft quite a bit.
Yes, they do.
I actually think that's a good idea because I think it gets young people who aren't. You don't take a class in high school as to all the impacts of everything you do and what you and that get you thinking about everything you need to have a successful business, a successful city, a successful whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those types of games actually build some of that.
build some of that understanding of if you
Consequences.
yeah. There's not I find that in school and not necessarily in a general sense, but there's a lot of punishment for telling you what you did wrong and never a lot of explaining what you did wrong, just so much as you got this wrong. Great. Well, how can you explain what was right about it? No, you failed the knowledge check.
Yeah.
And a lot of life is about understanding the cause and effect, and
Right.
and I really do believe that you can't really know what the what the effect will be if you don't understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. You know, unless you're just that kind of person that just like, all right, I throw a ball. Okay, it did that. Now I'll throw a ball harder. Okay, now it did that. Like, but you don't understand why. But you have to kind of understand why you're doing it, because you'll make you understand the effect of it. The effect that'll happen. It's often why I find people who, I love the phrase, when parents go to discipline their kids, their often statement is, why did you do that? Why didn't you think about that beforehand? And the child's like, well, the child that never speaks up is like, I didn't know what was going to happen.
You didn't understand
I'm
what
8.
the consequences were. Yeah. So I mean, I think those kinds of simulation games actually build some awareness that in order to have this, you have to provide for this, this, and this.
Yeah, and I like a lot of those computer games like SimCity really do also give you quite a bit of muscle and eye coordination with a mouse, which is certainly even with like tablets nowadays as well, it gives you a lot more hand-eye coordination, which is becoming far more necessary as we move into this digital age in a lot of cases. It wouldn't surprise me in another 20 years if we stop having, there's as an example, there's a big push right now in hotels, which is what I primarily work in, excuse me, to phase out the paper newspaper.
Yeah.
Because you order 10 in a day, and like they go super quickly, but like it's a lot of days you'll have a lot of extras. And again, we ordered 10 newspapers and we have like 5 or 6 left at the end of the day. So it's silly to have, and we're trying to push this online reader format because it's much easier. People can read it on their phone, they read it on their tablets, read it on their computer at their leisure, but a lot of people still love that feel of the newspaper in their hand.
Well, what's interesting when you say that is in business hotels anyway, it used to be that every morning there'd be a USA Today
in front of your door.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember having those USAs Today and putting them out in front of doors in some hotels I worked at.
Yeah.
Which is less and less common.
Yeah. So back to this topic, I agree with you. I think everything becomes digital. I think this Switch is just brilliant because it takes something that we're used to having in our hands. It's the size. It is just the size of a large format cell phone with joysticks on the end.
Mm-hmm. And you can take the joysticks off to walk around with it.
Well, and I'm used to having a cell phone on a stand. If I'm doing Zoom or something like that, I've got the cell phone on a stand.
Yes.
So it takes something I'm already comfortable in using, and gives it a different element. That's brilliant.
Yep. I love the Switch a lot. It's a great little tool. It's a great little tool to have. It's about as powerful as a PS4 and an Xbox One in a lot of cases, just without the CD interface and the massive hard drive. But again, I mean, like, for what it is, I believe it comes with about a 60 to 80 gigabyte space in it, but you can very easily upgrade that for like. I went online and bought a micro SD card for $25, $30 with taxes. Yeah. It's going to double the size of my memory on the system, and again, that's like $30 is basically I'm paying like a quarter for every gig. It's not the end of the world. It's very reasonable.
I do that on cameras. So where I'm getting the larger flash cards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there was a reason why I wanted you to play Super Mario Brothers, and there was a reason why I didn't explain to you what you were doing when you were doing it.
No, you just let me fail. Really, I did get to the end of the first episode, but I probably played 7, 8, 9 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
before I got there.
So, there's this. So I linked a video in
They
the
gave
original
me no
post.
clues whatsoever, except this is jumping, this moves you forward.
Yes. Um, so there's a great little video that does go about how when they designed the game, they made they were very efficient about stuff. So the clouds are actually literally the same graphics as the bushes that are on the ground. The only difference is that the bushes don't climb up as much, and the bushes are green as where the clouds are white. So they literally reused assets like that. But the design, even just that first little bit there, to teach you quite a bit. That first off, that you have to move,
Yeah.
you have to go to the right. You have the ability to jump, and you can jump over enemies, or you can stomp on them to defeat them.
Right.
There's the mushroom that you get, and the intention of that little narrow space in there that where the mushroom comes out at is basically meant to say the mushroom always goes to the right when you bump it, but you can't. If you thought it was a bad guy, you were trying to jump over it. You actually physically couldn't jump over it because of where because if you tried to jump over it while you were in that narrow corridor,
Yeah.
you'd jump right into it.
Okay.
So when they were designing the game, they were actually very smart about developing the level in such a way where you had to pass certain skill checks to get forward past it. So you had to be able to jump over the pipes, and you had to know, oh, if I hold the button down longer, I jump higher. If I'm moving forward to jump a pit, I have to run and then jump the pit.
Well, and there you're back. We're back here to my patting your head and rubbing your tummy comment,
Mhm.
because it would take me a while to have it be natural,
Yes, it would.
to be both pushing something and pumping something else with my thumb, to get that right,
And that's
to
okay.
have that be natural.
If you remember when we were playing World of Warcraft, you would
Yeah.
move the character and then you would do the actions
You're right.
for that. And in a lot of cases, one of the tricks we'll teach you when we play World of Warcraft again is to move is not to move while clicking on the ground, but you can actually move with some keys and then push buttons at the same time. What I find very interesting about video games, which is a lot more tricky for people who don't, in your case, have not been in it for a while, is that there is an inherent learning that you do when you play video games that comes rather naturally to you as you're playing it over time. There's an inherent knowledge that you get from video games. Some examples might be moving. Video games always move from the left to the right. The reason for that is that we have a dominant right hand, and so when we count numbers, as an example, we count from left to right typically.
Well, we read.
We read right to left, but keep in mind in Japan they read up and down.
That's true.
So they read up and they read up and down, and occasionally from left to right as well. So there's things like that. We always want power ups because those make us stronger or make us last longer. There's an element of knowing that red is usually a bad color in a lot of cases.
But I turned red and white at one point.
You did, and you got a fire flower, and I really wanted you to throw a fireball and to watch your face when you threw that.
How would I throw a fireball?
If you press B instead of A.
Really?
Yeah.
See, this is what happens when nobody tells me what to do.
And again, yeah,
I lose out on opportunity.
And mind you, it was somewhat intentional because I wanted to let you learn it on your own because it would be more memorable and it would be more impactful for you. Because I imagine if I left you this game and told you play it for just like 20 minutes every day, and then over the course of the week, how far can you get? I'd imagine you'd get through the first level by the end of the week. It'd be a slog for you to do it, but you would eventually do it, and you'd be able to get through later levels as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this brings up a whole different thing that I've been curious about, and that's that there's the new science, as it were, the new psychology, which is cognitive science, which is how the brain works and how the brain responds to things.
Yes.
And that goes into, I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal, of all places, that was talking about what it takes now to design games, that there's a lot of that cognitive science that takes place in the design because you have to understand what people's natural intuition is to do. And it does talk about the difference between old gamers and new gamers.
Yes.
And it draws a distinction between people who learned learned gaming 30 years ago, and people who are born into it now, where their experience of things that are digital is so much different.
Yes.
And that the two cognitively think very differently and approach digital very differently, and yet you're designing games that work for both. So it was an interesting article because it was talking about cognitive intuition being the next big avenue. If you were going to switch careers now, that would be a place to go.
Oh, absolutely. Because again, I mean, and while I can mostly speak for myself, I mean, would love to get my niece's take on this. Perhaps if they're capable of explaining to us properly, we may have to wait a few years for that.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of that is inherent knowledge from video games. I know when I pick up a video game, I have a fairly good understanding of what to do next in most cases. That I'll understand
intuitively because
intuitively, you know, I'll be able, and myself included. Like I love MMOs like World of Warcraft, and I played.
Yeah.
I've joked to myself, if I ever get a tattoo, I'm just going to get a list of all the different games I've played, and when one of the games just fails or I stop playing it, I'll just have a tattoo with an X over it, and then whatever the next one is, and just have the icons of as they would be on like my Windows Windows, which I think would be kind of interesting, which I would think would be kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I know when I go into one of those games, I can kind of already look at the UI as an example, the layout of where everything is, and be like, okay, that's that. This is where this is. Okay, and I can understand what it is relatively quickly. This is not something that would come naturally to a lot of other people, though, who don't experience those games all the time.
Well, what would be an interesting comparison would be how gaming companies design for Facebook, where you have an older audience playing versions of Solitaire and versions of Tetris and Bejeweled, because most of the games that are on there are versions of those things.
Yeah.
And clearly those games are designed for an audience that's 60 and up or 50 and up,
Mm-hmm.
an older audience. And how you design for that, where the graphics don't have to be anything, you're just dropping pieces of fruit or Candy Crush.
They don't have
one of those. And I mean, if you play Candy Crush, it's pretty intuitive until you get up a couple levels where you've got things doing bizarre stuff. But
yeah.
But what the cognitive difference is between designing for that and designing for what I would say is a pure gamer.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I kind of like about Mario, is that a lot of the games, including Mario Kart as an example, I think, which is the most prescient one.
Well, Mario Kart's such a hoot.
It is, but again, it's one of those games in which,
I mean, I suck at it, and it's a hoot.
But again, what's interesting about that game is that it's very easy to pick up and play right away. You might have to go through a couple races before you truly understand the controls.
I end up in the water,
which is all right. It's quite all right to fail. Fail is actually the best part of video games, because failing tells you, okay, you failed, try it again.
Well, okay, and I would go further and say that my strongest attribute is a willingness to fail, because it allows me to try all sorts of stuff.
And it taught you something when you failed, and that you will. It might be something as simple as, okay, avoid the water, or it might be, I need to jump at this particular point, but you learn something that'll move you on to the next point.
Yeah.
And what's great about a game like Mario Kart is that there's a hidden level of depth that's into it that you intuitively get over time. That when you do enough of the races long enough, that you'll eventually figure out, oh, there's these shortcuts here, or you'll learn, oh, I know what's coming up, so I'll take this turn better. Or you'll know that when you're in like first or second place, oh, I need to be careful of things coming to get me from behind, or I need to keep an eye out for certain stuff. So there's a skill level.
Stuff will happen,
and there's a skill level that gets built up over time. And that's one of the reasons why I like Mario Kart is that, well, in Super Mario Brothers, you fail, you just fail, and you have to try that section all over again. In Mario Kart, you can come in last every single race, and you'll get progressively better over time.
Yeah.
And you're not, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't get you from that, because where in Mario Brothers, you don't get to move on to the next level until you beat that first level. And if you have problems beating that first level, you never get to see the rest of the game. But in Mario Kart, you can be in dead last every single race, and you'll get to go through the entire game regardless.
Yeah.
It's not, and Mario Kart's one of those great games that doesn't gate you off from doing more content at all by limiting you to what you can do. You can do all of it right away.
Well, I'm terribly conscious now of the importance of choosing your character well.
Yes, and sometimes it is choosing your character well and understanding what it is that you're choosing.
I now understand why your brother likes a particular character.
Oh, there's a reason I like there's a reason I like one particular character, but mostly because she's annoying, and I appreciate Daisy when you don't have any items with you and she's just itemless and she's just talking and she's just like. When she doesn't have any items and you go to use it or you honk your horn, she does everyone does kind of a little emote. Like Koopa might grunt and Mario might go woohoo. It's like Daisy's like, it's Daisy, and I'm just like, hey, yes it is. That's why I like Daisy. She's an asshole. So
now we have a party here in our quarantine.
He stares at us.
Yeah, he's staring at us. So what is your favorite thing about Mario Kart?
Blue shells.
Blue shells.
He likes blue shells, yes.
He likes blue shells.
Yeah, the blue shell which wrecks your life. The other game I wanted to show was Mario Party because I enjoy the fact that you're playing a board game.
Yeah.
But Mario Party is all about you're playing a board game and so you move tiles and spaces.
But you're playing a board game on an arcade.
In an arcade mode, and you're playing it in such a way that...
Because I watched some of the YouTube on this.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting that you're playing a board game, but it's like playing a board game that is Santa Cruz Boardwalk.
Yeah.
If you would like, I do have the stuff to set up for us if we want. If
we're getting an offer here from our third-party commentator that we do have stuff to be able to set up Mario Party.
I think we might be a little beyond that point here right now. We can play it later.
We'll play it later because I would have fun. When I saw it online, what I thought was really interesting was you had the board game level,
mm-hmm.
and then you had
all the little mini games.
And it's an interesting combination of strategy, speed,
and luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of luck in the case of, do you get the right dice rolls to get as far as you want to go to get coins, and other times it's a dice roll of, do I land in a spot that gives me coins, or do I land in a spot that doesn't give me coins?
Well, it points out the difference between skill and strategy.
Yes.
And I thought that was an interesting component.
Because you could have all the worst luck in the world, but if you succeed at all the mini games, you have a shot of getting back into the game right away. So it's a good mixture of it. So if there's been games in which I've had horrible luck but been able to...
Well, there's strategy with the board game too.
Oh yeah, no. But again, they're just like bad dice rolls. I've had bad dice rolls in the past and then gotten to the mini games and eked out what I could in the mini games. And then I've had other times where I've had amazing board game luck and then just the worst mini games you could play.
Yeah,
and then I liked Mario Party because there's a lot of gameplay that's in Mario Party that makes it very family friendly for a lot of people to play. This is not there. Well, there's a bit of a competitive nature. It's a lot of competitive nature, not in that it's you against me. It's we're all trying to do our best.
Yeah,
and that's what I liked about that.
It looked like a ball.
So one of the reasons I wanted to really talk about Mario was actually to talk about some more video game stuff as a whole.
Okay.
And one of the topics I really wanted to talk about was actually speed running.
Speed running.
So take a wild guess what you think speed running is. It's not running while you're on speed.
Okay, so it's not me like pressing the joystick and hitting B.
Sort of, in some cases.
Okay.
So speedrunning is completing a game as fast as you physically can.
Okay, are you competing against somebody to do this?
You can, in a lot of cases you are, but you're not competing against somebody directly. So as an example, people play Super Mario.
Screenshot or it didn't happen.
Well, sometimes video or it didn't happen in a lot of cases. So as an example here with Super Mario Brothers, there are people that play that game and are able to beat that game within about 10 minutes. And
Good on them.
probably even faster. I don't know what the official Mario Brother 1 time is, but it's in there. It's pretty short.
Okay.
But these are people who, when they're playing the game, are making multi-second sort of button presses. Within microseconds to make sure that they hit the jump in just the right way, so they land on the right pixel to do whatever it is that they want to do for whatever next input is going to happen. They know when every single character is going to be there. They know exactly what's going to happen within a greater appreciation of that, or rather, they know that
Anticipation.
and greater anticipation. Like, they know there's going to be a monster right here. They don't know if it's going to go up or down, maybe, but they know there's a They know where all the monsters are. They know where all the blocks are. They've played this game a bajillion times, and speedrunning is actually very popular for a lot of, especially older games, and some newer games as well. But a lot of older games are very popular for that.
Because you've had time to memorize them.
Nope.
No?
So in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to older games are a lot more precise in the way that their inputs can go. So like, they know if Mario jumps if you make Mario jump, he's going to jump in that exact same way every single time you do it that way.
So it's more predictable.
Much more predictable. There are games that require either a fair amount of skill or a great amount of skill. So they're games that reward you for, if you play them long enough, that you will complete them quicker or faster, or that you'll be much better at it. And then there's also an element known as RNG, which RNG basically is the randomness. It's when you are fighting, for as an example, it's when you're fighting a Pokemon and they have 4 different moves they could use, and they keep using Growl all the time when they could be using Attack, which is a far more reasonable ability.
Okay.
That's RNG. They could use any one of those 4 different abilities. Who knows which ability they'll use?
Okay.
It's a certain level of randomness that's built into a game that makes it so that you're not always having to do the exact same thing. Because if the game was the exact same way all the time, somebody would eventually memorize the exact way to get through the entire game perfectly, and would just practice themselves doing that exact same input all the time. With RNG, though, it makes it so that you have to be, that not everything is always going to be perfect, so you have to have a little bit of wiggle room to be able to know, oh, when this happens, I now do this instead. And in some games, that could be a great element for them, but in a lot of speedrunning games, they prefer when that's minimized as best as possible, which is not always the case. There's a lot of games where there's RNG that we don't even know about. Like, for example, there's some video games that, depending on when you press start, will change elements of the game ever so slightly, because it's a randomized element. So sometimes there might be, depending on when you press start in the game, it might have monsters spawn elsewhere versus some other places, or it might have this one creature, instead of jumping up, might go backwards instead.
So is it predictable enough that
a computer can figure out what it is?
That a frequent player could figure out what it is?
It's enough that a person who plays it frequently enough will know where all the enemies are and will expect what the enemies are going to do.
Okay.
But there's literally an element called that's called a tool-assisted speedrun. And this is basically... so one of the things you need to know about video games is what they call frames. You'll hear this often. There's a frame-perfect skip, or there's a frame-perfect jump. And basically that means is that anytime every time like the screen moves forward in like Mario as an example, that's a frame.
Okay.
So usually a human brain can only input so many frames at a time. They can only see stuff at a certain speed. They have to literally intuit in like when like Mario is jumping, a person's pressing that button intuitively because they know. And when he drops down into jump again and then jump again, he's not jumping based off of, okay, now I landed, now I jump again. He's intuitively knowing, I know I'm going to land now, and then I'm going to do this now. I'd liken it to walking in a lot of cases where, like, you're walking and you never watch yourself when you're walking. You never stare at your feet when you're walking. You always intuitively know, I move my left foot right, left, right, now, and know the exact things are going to happen. Then when you hit a bump in the middle, you're just like, whoa, what happened there?
Yeah.
How did I trip on that? And this is what gamers in a lot of cases are doing because they're doing it very intuitively, but they're doing it but in this case they're stepping on like the crack of the sidewalk as they're doing it.
Okay.
And they're sprinting while doing it. So
Pretty
they're
cool.
intuitively knowing that they're hitting every single crack along the way, but they've got to kind of process, I've got to jump here and I'm jumping this and they're doing that. Well, there's a lot of inputs that are not physically capable because we need a certain amount of reactionary time to press it. And at the same time, our hands are not quick enough to press a button in some cases. So what ends up happening is that there's an element called a tool-assisted speedrun, which basically means every microsecond that you can play the game, you can add a new input in. So basically, you could program a person who would program one of these tool-assisted speedruns could play Mario Brothers perfectly.
That's not going to be me. We
No,
both understand that.
no,
right?
no. These are, mind you, these are people that would spend like weeks to months building these because
Yeah.
they're literally pausing
Yeah.
the game because they're literally going from a state in which they've done this input and now they get to do another input and then another input, and that might have just been the entire them jumping over a pit.
And these get retained in memory because you save them?
So what they're doing is they're building all these inputs in a computer essentially, and they're
Okay.
mainly playing on emulation software at this point. But the emulation software is at this point, which is such a extent that it mirrors the original content. Because there's some things that you just can't get anymore.
Okay.
Like it's very very hard to get original Super Nintendo with Super Metroid in it. That's just something that doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
They're not making any more of it, and people who do have it, unless it's very hard to get that.
Okay.
So a lot of people have to do
Collector's item.
Yeah, it's a collector's item at this point. So you could probably still get the console, but even then you don't know whether you're getting one that's in a good condition or a bad condition.
Yeah.
Do all the electronics works? I mean, it's practically a 20-year-old gaming. It's it's over 25 years old at this point.
See, you're getting old.
Yeah, I am. Oof. I never thought that would happen.
Beats the alternative.
So I mean. So they're playing it on. So emulation is a great tool, especially just for retention of these old stuff. Because again, I mean, like to play the old games, you need to have the original console software in the game.
Yeah.
For historical purposes, emulation is the next best thing. But these computers can play these games with another person programming it in such a way that they do it in such a perfect way that they get the frame perfect elements every single time, or they've done stuff that's been actually really funny with it.
Well, okay. So if you give me license, I'm snarky. If you give me license to do something, I might build something in it.
So as an example, I've seen a speedrun where Mario was crouched the entire time while playing the game. So if you press downward, Mario kind of crouches up almost and squinches down a little.
Yeah.
I saw a person. I've seen
Like
people
he's preparing to jump.
like he's preparing to jump. I've seen a tool-assisted speedrun where he does this all the time because what the system is doing.
So he's
is,
looking like a stalker.
well, he's looking like he's a small person the entire time. But what
Yeah.
the game is doing is that it's constantly holding down the downward button, but it's also doing all the other inputs to continue to play the game.
Yeah.
And you should never see all those other inputs because you're seeing these downward inputs every single time that happens. And that's just something that can only happen because the inputs are going in so fast that you can't see everything else.
Okay, but I guess the question with this ability, so if you're simulating the game and knowing what fandom is for other things, and
Yes.
some of the places that fandom can take other things, I would imagine that this could be taken other places as well.
Well, so keep in mind that a tool assisted speedrun is in the concept of speedrunning. A tool assisted speedrun is just a unique way to play the game. It's just
Right.
it's just a fun way to play the game by doing it as perfectly as you want to. What you might be talking about is people remaking or fan editing games,
Yeah.
which happens all the time in Super Mario. Which used to happen all the time in Super Mario Brothers or Super Mario World, which was the Super Nintendo version. They had variants of the game, which thankfully now that Mario Maker is out, this is not as common anymore. But they had versions of the game in which, if you didn't know how to play through it, it required you to do like all these frame perfect things all the time. So you'd have to grab a turtle shell, drop the turtle shell, jump up off the turtle shell, grab another turtle shell, jump off that as well. Like basically, it's like traveling across a room with spikes. And I'll see if I can link one of those videos in here. But what's interesting about speedrunning is that there's a huge community for speedrunning. And there are people that literally will play all these games, sometimes these older games and some newer games as well. And when I was just going through, probably some of the more top video games here for speedrunning, a lot of them were Super Mario Brothers 1, Super Mario Brothers 3, Super Mario World. Super Mario 64 is hugely popular for speedrunning. You have Super Metroid, which is one of my favorite games. Doom for the old PC. Quake, which is another PC game. These are older titles from the early 90s. These are still very popular to play and run. And you have some newer games.
Okay, so let me ask, and this goes back to the article that I read in Wall Street Journal that was talking about old gamers versus new gamers. Who are super runners? Are they older players that have grown up on this, or do they tend to be younger players trying to make an old thing new again?
A little bit of both sometimes. Obviously, a lot more of the people who are playing the older games are going to be people of my age in their late 20s, early 30s, maybe even late 30s. They grew up with these games. These are games in which, if you were to show me a speedrun of like Super Metroid as an example, I can watch that and be absolutely amazed at people's skill when they're playing the game. But if you were to watch it right now, you'd just be like, "Oh, well, that's how you. Well, this is a person playing the game at top level skill. Like this is how you play the game." And if I were to watch other people playing like Minecraft, Resident Evil, Undertale, like I have no idea how they play these games, and so I wouldn't be impressed by the speedrun. Speedrunning is obviously one of those things you appreciate if you play the game long enough or often enough that
You have to be pretty familiar with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. There's a certain level of appreciation for that. But what's interesting about speedrunning in here is that they're not just completing the game in some cases perfectly. Sometimes it's about limiting yourself in some cases. And some games let you
creating your own obstacle.
Yes, actually. So there's a couple common speedrunning elements. So one of which is the 80%. That's basically getting from start to finish as quick as possible.
Uh-huh.
But what 80% lets you do is that you can use glitches or exploits in the game that are not supposed to happen. Glitches are elements of the game in which are not perfect.
You're exploiting a flaw.
Yeah, and sometimes these flaws might let you go underneath the ground in which you weren't supposed to go underneath the ground, or they might let you fly forever in which you weren't intended to fly.
Yeah.
And in Super Mario World, they can let you beat the game in exactly like 37 seconds through a very complicated set of inputs and actions that Mario does. So what happens in Super Mario World is that the way items are layered in or buffered in a certain buffer, because they always remember where certain things are physically in the world.
Uh-huh.
So, like, if you leave a turtle shell somewhere, it always remembers that turtle shell was there until you go far enough. So what you can do with Super Mario World is you can place the items in such a way that when you do one particular action, it accidentally triggers the end credits and lets you immediately get to the very end of the game.
Well, that's kind of cheating.
It is. It's very much. 80% is very much cheating. Cheating is whatever you can to get to the end of the game, so long as you are not outright cheating, using whatever glitches and exploits you have that ability. There's the games for, as an example, that have like collectibles in them. There's the 100% run, which you got to collect everything.
Is it like Easter egg collecting, or?
So like some games have. So as an example, Super Mario 64 has 120 stars that you need to collect. That's the total number of stars that are in the entire game. And every world has has 6 initial stars and then a secret 7th star in it. And you have to go through the entire game, collect all the stars as well as the other stars around the world. So you don't need all 120 stars to beat the game, but in 100% you can't beat the game until you've collected all 100% of the items.
Interesting.
There's also a low percentage in which you play the game intentionally with getting the most minimal amount of those items that you need. So it might be skipping over some objects or some bosses, or missing out entire upgrades or collectibles to just beat the game as quick as possible with the most minimal amount needed. And then there's the glitchless, which means you play the game as intended.
Okay.
Which is the way I think you should play a game.
Yeah.
And then there's challenge mode, which might ask you to do challenges or play the game in such a certain way. As an example, might be that in, let's say, like in Super Mario Brothers, you never collect a single coin. Now the coins in Super Mario Brothers is that if you get 100 of them, you get an extra life, and they add to your score at the end of the game. But one example might be you never collect a single coin, or in Mario Kart you never collect you never go through an item box ever. You avoid all the item boxes.
Why would you want to do that?
Because it makes it more challenging and more difficult.
Yeah. So you're creating your own obstacles.
Yeah. So you're creating your own kind of challenge at the end of the day for that.
Yeah.
You could do that in Sonic with rings.
I was wondering about that too.
Yeah. Sonic has some variations where you either never jump or how many jumps can you, or how minimal jumps you can get through, or you never take the top path, you always take the bottom path, as an example. So you might ask yourself, where can you see some of these?
Where can you see some of these?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So I want to take a moment as well, because I talked about speedrunning, to also talk about streaming in Twitch. So in our modern digital age, we understand streaming as Netflix, Spotify,
right,
Disney Plus, Hulu. Basically, we don't own this physical media, but but through this,
we have access to it.
Through a payment method, we have access to view
subscriptions.
These subscriptions. Like, so if you have like HBO Prime or HBO Plus or Prime or whatever it's called. Yeah. You have the ability to watch Game of Thrones even though you don't own Game of Thrones. You've just licensed the ability to watch it for a period of time.
Yeah.
And so that's what we can. So when I talk about streaming, that's what I talk about streaming. So if you are watching something via Netflix, you're streaming because you don't own it and you're paying literal money to gain access to it. Versus like something like on YouTube, which that's not streaming, because on YouTube, that content's meant to be there forever and free to gain, so long as it's not gated by a paywall.
Right.
You're not paying anything, and it's always there to exist.
You watch an ad.
Absolutely.
You pay for it with your time.
You pay for it with your time, yeah.
Yeah.
In some cases, not all the time with an ad. It just may be there.
Yeah, depending on what it is. Yeah.
So to talk about that though is to talk about Twitch. Now Twitch is a video streaming service that's free for everybody. And what it primarily does is it allows video gamers to stream their video game plays online.
You're laughing.
Twitch plays Pokemon. Did you guys ever...
Twitch plays Pokemon, apparently. Okay.
Yeah. So basically what Twitch is that it lets you show whatever it is, the video game that you're playing, and then it gives you a chat box inside that allows you to interact with the people that are watching it. Now when you play the video game, you can have it where You can talk while you're playing, so you can explain what you're doing or when you're doing it.
Right.
You can have a certain interface that lets you have that shows a picture of you playing at the same time, and then also has like little details about what's going on.
I'm actually familiar with this from seeing it done. We saw it at Fanime.
We've seen it at Fanime. If you ever got
You've
to watch,
seen it a lot.
if you ever got to do Desert Bus, that's where they primarily do that on
Yeah.
Twitch. And it's a great little element that lets people watch what other people are doing, and sometimes, as an example of Twitch plays Pokemon, the chat can literally do the inputs for Pokemon as well. There's a interface that lets them you say commands, and it translates it to controller inputs. It buffers crazily and it's weird, but it's sometimes kind of fun to watch people play. Twitch plays Pokemon is like watching 3,000 players play Pokemon all at once.
The same game.
The same game, yeah.
At the same time.
All at the same time.
Not playing their own game, playing
Play simultaneously.
Yeah, they're all playing the same
Collaboratively.
game.
So if I wanted to play World of Warcraft, I could like be World of Warcraft in something like that.
You could do. There's a lot of people that actually play World of Warcraft on Twitch. There's a lot of people that just play themselves leveling or have interesting commentary on it. I find Twitch most interesting when it's people I like watching play video games, and people that either have funny expressions or interesting comments on games, like especially when it's game designers who explain why this is such, or people who have interesting personalities.
Can you follow a specific person on Twitch?
Yes, you can. You can follow. They have channels like YouTube, so they call them channels.
Oh God, I'm really good at intuiting where you want to go, because it seems to me like if you liked a particular person and how they played, I want to somehow subscribe or follow that person,
And
following somebody on Instagram or something.
And you can. And so if you subscribe to somebody, you can actually pay them like a couple bucks a month, and in a lot of cases they're like $4 or $5 a month.
Okay.
And part of that money goes to Twitch, and the other part of that goes to the content creators.
Right.
And I know, for my personal example, and the people I linked to on the podcast in the last blog post on our website, was a group called Loading Ready Run, and so it's a collection of about.
We've used them before.
Yes, so it was about 10 to 11, I think maybe 12 people that are a part of that team, and they all will occasionally, and they all have kind of their own little time slots on their channel, which they play games at. In some cases, they're all playing the same game, or they're playing Magic the Gathering, or they're one of them is playing Minecraft, while another person is working through like Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
In other cases, there are, as an example here, one of the most popular Twitch players, since it was recently actually got off Twitch as of the last month, within the last year here, is a gentleman by the name of Ninja. He played first-person shooter games professionally, and regularly had people watching him play professionally. He would regularly make about $100,000 a month playing.
Wow.
Because he had a collection of about 14.
Now, can you pay to play against him or with him, or?
I don't know if you would. I don't know what that would have to depend on everybody and individual terms.
Yeah.
I know a lot of Twitch players that just play with random people constantly, or other people play as part of like a group of people they call a clan, or they play all together in that sort of sense, or they just play with certain people. But as an example, again, if you want to play with that particular person, I don't know what the process for that is in a lot of cases. Some people will offer to pay to play with a person like that, or they might do here's this invite code, come into the channel. My favorite things to watch on Twitch are actually the Jackbox party games, because these are party games in which you have the audience can participate in the game as well. And they have sometimes even more control than the people that are on the actual game.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Jackbox is amazing. They have all these great party games that you could play with. And I like it for a company function, because you can have everybody in the company playing along, but you can have like the prime like executives or something being the major players, but you can have all the people in the audience playing along with them.
Oh, that'd be fun.
And they have funny prompts, and they have weird sort of gimmicks. One of it is basically just fill in the blank who filled in the blank better, which is Quiplash. Another game is basically you have to make up lies about somebody else on the internet. So, like, somebody, as an example, somebody will give a response to something, and then you have to make a new tagline for it. You know, so
Oh,
like
that'd be fun.
so like
Yeah.
so like somebody might say, well, you know, like I loved the smell of cheese in the morning, and somebody might say what Stalin said before he blew up something. So you make them sound horrible as a result,
Yeah.
which is the intention. And there's a lot of games like that, and I like those games a lot on Twitch because, especially if you like the people who are playing it to begin with, it's funnier because a lot of those guys make in-jokes about themselves, and I find that to be hilarious. But Twitch doesn't just do video games; it does a lot of other things too. So it's got channels for arts and crafts. So if you're a person that sews, for example, you could do sewing as a Twitch thing, or cooking. They do have
Knitting.
knitting as an example. Well, again, I mean, they have elements like that available. They also have cooking talk shows and podcast kind of things like we are doing. There's even channels that are just devoted to just doing music reviews and stuff like that. It's also a little bit of politics, but it's not as common on Twitch at all. There's some people who broadcast their shows on Twitch and then redo it for their own website, as an example. The greatest one I like, though, is the one I find kind of the most interesting is what they call live casting. So you remember The Truman Show, right?
Right.
It's basically that.
Oh,
Where you just kind of watch a person 24/7.
interesting. Okay.
So, and that's actually how Twitch got started. It got started as a company called Justin.tv. And the intention was to let people broadcast whatever they wanted to broadcast to as many people as they wanted at a time, with the intention of people that would be broadcasting their lives. And one of the great examples is that there was a person from Iraq who basically live casted their entire life during the course of the 2007-2008 Iraq War.
Wow.
And that was the kind of very interesting. There's a couple others that still exist. Clearly, video games became the most popular thing on Justin TV, and they eventually split it to Twitch to just cover all the video game stuff. And then in 2014, they were preparing to merge with Google. At one point, Google was going to acquire them, and so they basically moved everything from Justin.tv to Twitch and rebranded themselves as Twitch Incorporated. But what ended up happening is Amazon ended up buying Twitch.
Oh, interesting.
So now if you have Amazon Prime, you can actually subscribe to at least one YouTube or one Twitch program, and the Twitch person will get that money instead.
Oh, that's kind of
So
cool.
yeah, and that comes with Amazon Prime. There's a lot of cool elements with Amazon Prime because they've gotten also involved with another company called Curse, which did a lot of which was big into video game communities in general. So they were big for like World of Warcraft, Counter-Strike, and a lot of other games as well. And so now what's really kind of interesting is that you go onto Twitch and they literally give you if you're a member of Amazon Prime, they give you a scroll down of like, oh, if you're playing any one of these games, here's some freebies for these games.
Oh, that's kind
Or
of
here
cool.
are some free games.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
that's very cool.
So yeah, so if you're into like Fortnite as an example, they might have once a month they might give away some sort of special skin or some sort of special loot bonus or something on there, which is kind of fun and neat.
That is cool.
Twitch also is a big sponsor of esports. And esports are just what they sound like. They're professional video game players. Usually, though, they're usually from multiplayer games primarily.
So that you could have competition.
So you can clearly have competition, and it might be either like a
Shooters.
There's a lot of first-person shooters, fighting games. There's card games, oddly enough, with Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering. There's some battle royale games like Fortnite and PUBG, as well as some real-time strategy games like StarCraft. And usually it's either games in which you might have like a one-on-one sort of experience, or 10 versus 10 team sort of things. Anything in which you would have a tournament bracket on there.
Okay.
And there's a lot of games like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Overwatch, Super Smash Brothers, Hearthstone, Call of Duty that are being played as professional esports. What I actually found kind of interesting is that they're actually being recognized by the Olympics.
Oh, that's because that's not an athletic sport.
It's not. They've been recognized by the Olympics as a potential sport for including in the Olympics. The trick, obviously, is what game and what patches and stuff like that, because that's clearly something that changes over time.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a problem for speedrunners nowadays, especially with newer games, because the advent of patches that update games are not always in the same state all the time. So if you have like a high score on, like, say, Super Mario 64, and then they change an element of it, well, your score is not valid anymore because that was during the old version, not the new version.
I deal with a different version of that, and that's that when I teach, I'll go to conferences and I'll teach how to use a particular brand of software,
Mm-hmm.
and we all need to agree. I need to turn in materials months in advance, but the versions may change.
Yeah.
And then I'm having to redo materials and having to
Get it approved all over again.
Yeah. And so I'm real familiar with last minute version changes.
What I also found kind of interesting, and I knew about this because of Overwatch, that Overwatch did this cool thing where they have cities that are promoting their own teams for Overwatch. So you
Right.
have like Los Angeles versus Seattle versus Chicago versus Phoenix versus like
Yeah.
Austin. But a lot of what's actually going into this is actually colleges. In colleges right now, at least 130 different schools, and we're talking about higher education colleges, have an esports program of some nature at them, which is kind of interesting. And that might be from people either as a full-time course or like as a side course sort of thing.
Or an intramural.
Yeah, well, not just intramural, like actual like preparing people for professional video games.
Wow.
You know, which again, very interesting.
I don't want to pay for that major.
No, I don't either. I think, it's like for them. I think it's more like joining a club, like you would like a baseball club or something like that,
Okay.
maybe,
All
or
right.
or maybe like you get a scholarship for esports, but you're really going for like a business major, but you just happen that this is just how you pay for school.
Okay.
So it's
All
not,
right.
yeah, it's in much the same way they would treat like like basketball, like you get a basketball scholarship.
So I want to suggest as a future topic that we talk about professional gamers, because I would really like to understand how you make doing this professional.
Well, there's a couple different ways, and a lot of
I think it's a topic for a future podcast.
oh, absolutely, I think
I
we
think
can
it'd be interesting.
I can definitely scour some stuff on there on that, because it is kind of an interesting topic as professional gamers.
Yeah.
But what do you think about all this additional other stuff beyond the Marios?
Well, so I really enjoyed playing, and on the Switch that was fun because it really is this little pixelated creature.
It really is.
Yeah, and it very much harkens back to the early '90s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's been interesting to watch it all sort of evolve.
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting things.
Having seen it from the small handhelds, and then you all had Game Boys, and we had the GameCube. What did we?
You
have?
had the GameCube, and then I think you got a Wii eventually.
Yeah, and we had Rockstar, and we're doing that for a while, which is a whole different
genre, but
a whole
just
different
as fun.
genre. Okay. And all having experienced that, and then seeing what it's become, and seeing how they've developed, and I'm real interested in also the idea of how you monetize these things, because you either have it in your home, or now you have all sorts of ways to monetize it by having it online,
Mm-hmm.
and in so many different formats too.
We can almost do another podcast on that as well.
Wait, because you have all the Facebook games.
Mm-hmm.
You have all the games that you can now download on your iPad and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Angry Birds. I can remember 10 years ago being on a flight and walking back to the bathroom and walking back to my my seat. And I like bulkhead, so I'm like going almost the whole distance of the plane. And every single row had somebody playing Angry Birds.
Yep, I played the Angry Birds at one point.
Yeah. So having seen it evolve into something that was on my phone, was a phone app, something that's on Facebook and other sites like that,
Mm-hmm.
and then something that's available online, like we play World of Warcraft, and all the and then you have the things like a Switch, which is more what I originally was familiar with, was something that you bought a cartridge, stuck it in, and played from.
Yes.
I would have never foreseen its evolution, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I can agree. Yeah, it's certainly gone in a far different way than I thought video games would go.
I mean, a little known fact, you used to test games for Namco when you were 12, 13, 14 years old.
I did, and I figured out how to cheat in them too, which is what they didn't want me knowing.
Well, but that's why they were hiring you. I mean so you were a paid video game tester, and they liked you very much.
Yes.
They had you back and back and back and back and back.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it helps we're in Silicon Valley, but that was something you sort of lucked into, and so you've always kind of been.
I'll tell you about a war story I did for one summer when I tested video games for a summer.
Okay.
You think of testing video games as...
And you were testing for Namco.
When I was 12, but this was in college. So
okay.
when I was in college, I went to Cal Poly Pomona, which was very close to Irvine, which is where a lot of
ESA and
a lot of video game companies are at.
Yeah.
Because it's down south, it's in a nice area. They have a lot of campus spaces. It's like Irvine's like little Silicon Valley is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And I remember playing a first-person shooter, and I must have played this game for about a month before I just couldn't do it anymore. They liked me because I was good at explaining what happened and when it would happen. And you get the idea that you're testing a video game, thinking, "Oh, well, I'm going to test a video game, and I'm going to play through this entire game, and I'm going to make it a better game." No, my job was to jump on every single object in the game. And my job was to test every single time I jumped on objects to see whether they had the proper collision on them or not.
Well, failure analysis.
Failure analysis, absolutely. But there was also times in which if certain items were placed in a certain way, sometimes they would cause you to fail on that, and you had to figure out how it happened and when it happened.
What were the chain of sequence of things that you did that caused it to happen?
Yeah, so you'd write this detailed report about when it happened, and then you would start the game back up and try it again to make sure you did it. And you could be where...
If you could replicate it.
Well, you would have to replicate it.
Yeah.
And so it might be one of these cases where you had to get all the way to the end of the game, having done all this other minutia of stuff, just to test to see to make sure this worked again.
Well, it's interesting to me that they would go to that extent.
Well, yeah.
Because failure analysis is huge in software.
Mm-hmm. But mind you, it wasn't just me doing this. This was probably another 100-plus people doing this as well. And they were doing other stuff. Like one guy was just testing rockets had to be shot at from every single location at everything in the map.
Yeah.
To test to make sure that the rockets hit everything properly. That there wasn't a pixel out of alignment that the rocket could go through and then would go through the geometry of like a wall or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there were elements like that. Like this was a lot of hours for like minimum wage, what was at the time. So like it was not a job I did again. But it was certainly like an interesting job.
Well, I think
for the period of time that it was.
Any number of times that your father has gone around to his 7th grade class and said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" So many of them want to be game designers or game testers. And I'm thinking, geez, I have a son who did that. It wasn't that fun.
Well, not even so much. It's not that it wasn't fun. It's that everyone thinks they're going to be the guy that creates the next Mario or is going to be the guy that makes all these cool gameplay elements. And then they forget the fact that there has to be somebody in there that programs all this stuff. One of my favorite YouTube channels that I'm watching right now is a graphic designer who goes through video games describing the UI elements of a video game. And it's very interesting because he does this thing called good design, bad design, where he talks about good UI design versus bad UI design. It's especially in either menus or game screens or even just like logos and fonts in some cases. Like it's fun to watch because you look at it and you're just like, now I look at games in which like, is this an intuitive look at or is this not an intuitive look at? Like,
Well,
how
that's
many
back
different
to that whole cognitive science thing,
Mhm. No, and again,
which is huge.
oh, absolutely. But no, again, I think it's a great idea that we can do another episode about the financials of video games, because there is a lot of ways to, as a gamer, make money off of video games. But there's also but video games are also have done especially the last decade or two, have done a great way of trying to find ways to continue to make money off of video games even after they've been released.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, and I'm going back to the Facebook example. If you remember back probably 7-8 years, you had the whole Farmville thing,
Mm-hmm.
where people were suddenly realizing that they were amassing huge bills playing this stupid game,
Yes.
and they were shocked by the bills that they were amassing. And they had Farmville and Frontierville, and there were several versions of it. And then it disappeared from the face of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
People are still playing Candy Crush, but
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be interesting to me to see how things are monetized on different formats.
I can bring that for you.
Yeah.
That'll be a great idea. That's a great topic for our next podcast.
Okay.
So, but I think now this is a good place to stop this one.
Yeah,
And
no,
so-
really enjoyed Mario. Enjoyed the fact, and again, even play Mario Kart, which is a fairly newer game.
Oh no, Mario Kart's been around since Super Nintendo.
Oh, has it really?
Oh, it's been around for a very long time.
I'm only familiar with whatever I'm playing it on at Mark's.
That would probably be on the Switch.
Yeah.
Switch or the Wii U if you had it at that point.
Yeah. But I love the fact that it's charmingly predictable. It
Mm-hmm.
stayed the same.
Oh yeah, no, Mario Kart's been one of those great games that, outside of the courses, the games have been the exact same games for the last.
I love that.
For the last basically decade.
It's charming.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll have all these notes, and I'm going to share a couple more things on speedrunners. I'm going to have, what I'll do is I'll give an example of a speedrunner, and then I'm going to try to find another task or tool-assisted speedrun as well that I can put up onto there as well, onto our blog at nerdtutorialpodcast.com, and so which is where you can find all of our show notes and all the different videos and elements we have on there. You can also follow us with the discussion on facebook.com/Nerd Tutorial Podcast, where I do post up different kind of reviews and stuff. There's quite a bit of anime I've watched over this last month.
Oh, fun.
So I might be leaving some reviews there. One of these days I'll talk to you about the Fate series.
Oh, fun. Okay.
One of my favorite anime series of all time. But then as well, you can follow us at nerd_tutorial on the Twitters. And yeah, we're following all the different topics that we have that we've also covered. So we're covering Mario, we're covering Batman, and we're also covering cosplay, zombies, and all of our previous topics that we've had before.
Wrestling.
Wrestling.
They're wrestling in Florida.
Yeah, and I have mixed opinions on that too.
Yeah.
But on behalf of myself and my mom, we thank you so much for following with us here today. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys again next week.
Bye.